We've all heard the news. EA, the destroyer of studios and games, it seems have laid off 300 plus staff under their wings, working on new unannounced games, top secret projects, and less top secret stuff. It seems Respawn Entertainment, the studio that brought you the likes of Star Wars, Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order, Apex Legends and Titanfall were hit with about 100 people being let go. One such top secret project was apparently a new Titanfall game. For a bit of context, Respawn had about 80 something devs when they released the first Titanfall, so 100 people is still a pretty significant number for Respawn. Imagine it's more than they needed to release the first game. Now, the layoffs affect primarily these two unannounced games and cuts to the Star Wars Jedi and Apex Legends teams. At least from what we know about the Titanfall game, it was an extraction shooter codenamed R7. Cancellations like Concord and reveals of Bungie's Marathon, which well, the jury's still out on that one, but a lot of people didn't like my take on that, despite me saying it looks fine. I mean, extraction shooters don't really make people go excited, it doesn't really have that much of a positive appeal, at least from what I get from the commentary online. I mean, you tell me in the comments, do you get excited over a new extraction shooter? When you hear there's plans for a new Titanfall game, you feel really excited, only to be let down hearing it's another extraction shooter. I mean, when will we get Titanfall 3? Or are they working on Titanfall 3? Or has EA just turned Respawn into the Apex Legends and Star Wars studio, forgetting their first hit, Titanfall? You know that game, there was so much hope for it. This was to be EA's Call of Duty from the makers of Call of Duty, with the exodus from Infinity Ward and Vince Zampella. But sure, it wasn't Call of Duty because Respawn wanted to do something different and focus on the core part of the game as a kick-ass futuristic mech-based multiplayer-only game, at least for the first Titanfall. I did get Titanfall at launch and played the multiplayer quite a bit. Yeah. In my younger days, I was a bit of a multiplayer shooter fan of myself, the man-shoot fan. I hung out a lot in Battlefield 3 as a medic. But yeah, Titanfall was not balanced, but it was a ton of fun. But in the earlier days, it was rife with a lot of exploits for sure, which is to be expected really. But the reception had been awesome. People asked why there wasn't a single player campaign, and Respawn delivered that in the sequel, Titanfall 2, which also had an amazing bunch of reviews with lots of great things said about the campaign. Titanfall 2 probably had more than just 80 people working on it though, I'm pretty sure about that, since it also had a single player component and it's just a lot more compared to the first game. Now, according to Respawn, this game was in early incubation stage, which meant it was probably in an experimental phase that focused on getting the game system, the game loops right. Devs try out things in this phase, and if the studio or the leadership of the studio don't see anything that has potential in it, projects get canned all the time. So those two projects, if they were to keep them, were still probably 2 years at least from release, at least, So the question is, what is Respawn working on? I mean, we know for a fact that Respawn is working on the next Star Wars Jedi series, the final chapter they call it. They are also working with Bit Reactor, albeit in a more smaller capacity, on Star Wars Zero Company, a new XCOM-like tactics game. And over the past year or two, EA has been on a culling mission with Respawn. They have cancelled an Apex Legends, apparently single player based game, and also they were working on a Star Wars FPS game which apparently got cancelled too. So we know at this point Respawn has had about 300 to 400 staff. Let's put it at 350, and with the 100 down, that would put them about 250 people. You still need some people working on Apex Legend, so let's put that at maybe 50 people or maybe less. We know that by the time they launched Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, they had 200 people working on it, so I guess that they are quite far along with Star Wars Jedi 3 or Final Chapter or whatever they'll call it. So that project will have the bulk of staff working on it. There are very little people, or maybe not enough to even support a second game, honestly, in development at Respawn. But it's still possible for a small team, like 20-man team, to begin work on a new game. They did it with the first Star Wars Jedi game. Whether that is a Titanfall 3 or something else, like, we can only speculate. But I feel it would be a waste to relegate Titanfall to the past of Respawn's catalog. A Titanfall 3 would make sense, as it's been 9 years since the release of Titanfall 2. So don't you think that next year Titanfall 2 would be 10 years, and maybe that's the perfect time to announce Titanfall 3? And perhaps they will add co-op single player campaign, like a true story campaign in co-op. I personally think it would be hard to believe Respawn wouldn't do another Titanfall, and I don't think they have that aversion that Valve has to any game with the number 3 in it. I don't think though that's in the cards. Exactly how long out, I don't think even Vince and Pella can answer you that. Maybe a guess of like 2 to 4 years? Sure, hopefully. And speaking about 100 plus people working on games, that is a very small scale compared to the likes of what Rockstar is doing with Grand Theft Auto 6, a game that is rumored to cost upwards of $1 billion to develop. And yes, the looming threat, or has it already happened? I think it has. Price increase for AAA games due to the ever-ballooning cost of game dev. Will people still spend money on very expensive games? Well, based on the sales of Switch 2 and Mario Kart, it seems yes. And it does look like the industry, at least Microsoft, is also following suit. I would find it hard to believe EA wouldn't do this as well. But there are outliers, of course, like Claire Obscure Expedition 33, a game that you've probably heard a lot of people talk waxing lyrically about it, but the success of the game has been very interesting. A proof that the video game industry doesn't always have to go down this path of scaling upwards. Anyway, that's something I'll talk about in a future video, not too long though. I think for Respawn will continue to be a very tight and small team, like small as in a 100 so 200 300 man team from time to time, and they get called from time to time as projects get canned or projects go into different phases of their life cycles, right? Anyway, tell me if you like Titanfall 2, and if there is a Titanfall 3, what would you like to see in Titanfall 3? Tell me in the comments. I recently did a video on Star Wars Zero Company, a game Respawn has a hand in, and it might be a tactics game that might do quite well. Check out that video over here. Thanks for watching, and farewell, noble friends.